Started. We had a little bit of technical difficulty there. The time is 7:05 p.m. We have the presence of a quorum, and notice of the meeting has been duly called. The meeting has been duly called, and notice of the meeting has been posted for the time and manner required by law. If everyone will please stand for the presentation of colors and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance and the singing of the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed as the twilight's last gleaming, whose bright stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight for the ramparts we watch were so gallantly streaming, and the Rockies red clear and Mont's bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave on the land of the free and the home of the brave?
And now the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Free, colors. Free, and colors.
I pledge allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one indivisible. Free, colors. Oath. Forward, arch.
So let's thank the Elkins High School Air Force JROTC for that presentation of colors. And Destiny Young for that beautiful rendition of the national anthem. And our Quail Valley Middle School 8th grade students, Tomi Fasiiku, Yemi Fasiiku, Amy Pagura, and Mayank Kumar. Thank you, guys. Excellent job. We'll now get started with our board workshop. Okay, we're starting off this evening with our information items, and first up is the Schoology Learning Management System update. Dr. Dupree.
Yes, ma'am. We're going to get back to teaching and learning tonight. Deanna Saavedra, our Chief Academic Officer, is going to introduce the report and introduce her team, including Stephanie Williams, our Executive Director. Deanna?
All right, good evening, Madam President, members of the board, and Dr. Dupree. Let me begin by saying that this is a proud moment in Fort Bend ISD. Through an extensive collaborative process, long hours, dedication, and hard work, we have developed a robust curriculum with teacher tools to address the needs of all learners. Thank you. As I said, as part of the process, there were many critical stakeholders, and this was a very extensive collaborative effort. So at this time, will the team members from Academic Affairs, the Information Technology Services Department, the Program Management Office, and any teachers who are present this evening who were part of the curriculum writing process, please stand to be recognized. I just want to thank the team because, as I said, it's been an extensive process and a very collaborative effort. So I congratulate you and I thank you for your hard work. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Ms. Stephanie Williams, the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, so she can provide us an update about the process, the Schoology implementation, and the blended learning pilot. Stephanie?
Thank you, Deanna. Good evening, Dr. Dupree, Madam President, members of the school board. Tonight, we will provide an update on the curriculum development process and the implementation of the learning management system, Schoology. 2 district strategic plan goals guided the work in curriculum development and the launch of the learning management system. First, the curriculum development goal outlined a process to rewrite the science and social studies curriculum. Second, the learning management system goal outlined a process to migrate the curriculum from PCG to the Schoology learning management system and included plans for a blended learning pilot emphasizing the need to pilot the recommended classroom devices and measure the level of blended learning implementation. During tonight's update, we will offer information in 3 parts. First, the curriculum development process, including a preview of curriculum components. Second, we will outline the implementation plan for Schoology. And finally, we will summarize the progress on the blended learning pilot and the metrics for evaluating that pilot. Beginning with the curriculum development process. In order to produce a product that meets the needs of all students and to provide guidance for teachers on differentiated instruction, we needed to develop a team with specific skill sets to the development of the curriculum. The cross-functional writing teams were made up of curriculum content staff who are experts in the content, technology integration specialists, teachers and leaders in the area of gifted and talented, special education, and multilingual, and most importantly, content area classroom teachers to guide the work. This team makeup mirrors our organizational structure within teaching and learning. Initially, to establish a student-centered curriculum, it was necessary to define a set of standardized curriculum components which would be included in all curriculum unit maps. Next, the establishment of a systematic process for the writing and development of curriculum was essential to the creation and buy-in of the curriculum content by our classroom teachers. This process is shown on the slide as a cycle, beginning with a writing task. The curriculum writing team, that cross-functional team, would prepare a unit of instruction. For instance, the first unit in first grade mathematics. Once that unit was drafted, it went to a vertical team for review consisting of K through 5th grade curriculum content writers. After that review and revision, we had a reviewers meeting and invited teachers and leaders across Fort Bend in to provide feedback on the curriculum documents. That feedback was used to revise unit maps. Once the revised unit maps were in place, they went to directors and content area curriculum coordinators for final review and then were published according to our phased posting schedule. We're very proud to say that during the curriculum development process, we engaged over 122 curriculum writers in the process and had over 1,000 teacher feedback responses that provided input into the development process. Following tonight's presentation, you will be invited to participate in a live demonstration of the curriculum within the Schoology platform. While the district strategic plan goal called for curriculum writing in science and social studies, the curriculum development process and content migration impacted all content area courses. During the development process, 2 key milestones were accomplished. First, the identification of standardized curriculum components which ensure all teachers in grades K-12 access to the same resource to plan instruction. And second, establishing the OneNote structure for accessing the curriculum within Schoology. OneNote is a tool like a digital notebook within the Microsoft Office Tools suite, which allows for the curriculum to be linked within each unit in Schoology and accessed for ease of navigation by teachers. Progress on the curriculum thus far is on track as according to the posting schedule, which was adjusted after Harvey. In the next few slides, we will overview key components of the curriculum unit maps that support student ownership of learning, student self and peer assessment, and the differentiation guidance to help teachers meet the needs of all students. On this screen, you'll see an example of the learning progressions. These learning progressions are provided within each unit map to explicitly define what students need to know and be able to do to meet proficiency of the grade level expectation. They provide a resource for teachers to define building blocks aligned with content that students need to be successful. They guide instruction, intervention, and enrichment. Most importantly, learning progressions support student ownership of the curriculum through explicitly defining milestones on the path to proficiency. A long-standing goal that you as the Board of Trustees have messaged is a priority to provide a robust curriculum that allows teachers to differentiate and meet the needs of all students. This slide is an example of what teachers will find in the curriculum to support differentiation. The icons in the table at the top row are known as tags within the Schoology OneNote. These tags indicate differentiated supports that are available to guide teacher planning. On the far left, you'll see the 21st Century Skill tag, which looks like a red ribbon. That is tied closely to our profile of the graduate and offers guidance on how to integrate 21st century skills into instruction. The middle 2, related to blended learning, indicate ways that we can integrate technology within a particular unit. And where you see the computer, known as the Schoology icon, those are blended learning exemplars that are already built within the Schoology platform for teachers to use to deliver instruction via a blended model. Finally, the far left-hand column is our differentiated instruction supports designed to support special populations of students, English language learners, our gifted and talented students through enrichment, and accommodations to support 504 and special needs students. You'll note the icons on this screen as part of the instructional delivery process. These exemplars indicate instructional supports to support teachers as they build the 21st century skills for our students related to the profile of a graduate, and as they implement differentiated learning to meet student needs. We believe that these icons and the content that is tied to them ensure equitable access to the curriculum content for all students. This slide shows a picture of the tiered instructional delivery. You often hear Dr. Dupree talking about the curriculum, mentioning that the curriculum is what teachers will teach. One of the pieces from the curriculum audit and in our guidance through our work in learning last year is that the curriculum should be written for a first-year teacher. A first-year teacher comes in a few sizes. One who has 0 years experience just entering the career, one who is new to a grade level, or one who may be new to the content area. The instructional delivery section is divided into Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 guidance to provide teachers an approach at each level of instruction. The key in the instructional delivery is that it ensures that no matter the geography, where our students live, they have the same access to curriculum content. In September, we presented the assessment update and referenced key curriculum tools that support the transition to a student-centered assessment philosophy. On this slide, you'll see examples of those tools, both a holistic rubric and a student self-assessment checklist. These tools provide clarity on what success looks like for students. They promote a growth mindset, they build student ownership, and they increase student engagement through goal setting. The final component of the curriculum we'll highlight tonight is the Reengagement Section. This component supports student access to the curriculum by providing an opportunity for teachers to re-engage students with content. As parents, we have students who struggle with a particular concept and need another look at that concept in order to understand it. The re-engagement area is divided into if students, and that column defines a common misconception in that unit in student learning. The right-hand column says then, and it defines teacher approaches in order to clarify that student misconception. This section allows flexibility for teachers to address student needs while maintaining a pacing calendar. So these days for re-engagement are built within each unit of instruction. To align with the tiered instructional delivery, resources are tiered to provide teachers with multiple avenues to support student understanding. It is important to note that resources at the Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 level are only mentioned within the curriculum if they are district-adopted resources, which all campuses have access to. By doing this, by aligning the resources within the unit, we can save our teachers time in the planning process and provide resources to ensure appropriate practice experiences for our students. As you can see, the curriculum is designed in a robust manner, and in order to do a full implementation of the curriculum, it is necessary to have a comprehensive professional learning plan that supports the curriculum. In the required summer professional learning and also within the new teacher orientation program, all teachers in Fort Bend ISD received 3 trainings. The first training introduced teachers to the new curriculum components and provided support for how teachers would access and use those components within the professional learning communities as they designed lessons. Next, they learned how to use Schoology to access the curriculum and as an instructional tool. Finally, content area teachers engaged in training around the instructional model to support the delivery of instruction. Throughout this year, ongoing job-embedded professional learning will provide additional supports for both the curriculum development and Schoology implementation. You've heard it said many times that the fidelity of implementation of the curriculum impacts student success more so than any variable. What the teacher does in the classroom matters. This tool will help us to measure the implementation of the curriculum. We will use a campus support team structure which partners central office departments with campus administrators to develop a district-wide message around curriculum implementation and a common vocabulary around what instruction looks like. Data from the campus support team walks will be used to gauge curriculum alignment to the scope and sequence, rigorous alignment to the standards, and the alignment of instruction to the instructional model within a content area. Campus support team walks are principal directed, meaning that principals identify the instructional focus for the walks that occur on their campus. Once the instructional focus is identified, they identify classrooms for the team to walk. Central office administrators partner with campus administrators to walk classrooms using this tool that you see on the screen. At the end of the walks, we have a discussion around evidence. We look at what are teachers doing and what are students doing within the instructional environment. From there, the campus will identify next steps for action or needed campus support. The data from the campus support team process will provide insight to us on the level of curriculum implementation and also help us to identify professional learning needs for the future. And now I'll shift to the second part of the presentation around the Schoology implementation plan. Our project manager, Ann Howard, helped us to divide the Schoology implementation plan into 4 phases. In phase 1, we set up project management protocols and we planned the content migration for the existing curriculum into Schoology. From there, we engaged in discovery around technical and instructional features within Schoology. As we entered phase 2 to get started, we identified roles and permissions and built out test environments to support classroom instruction. In this phase, leaders in the Curriculum and Instruction Department and the Information Technology Services Department engaged in professional learning, to fully understand the capacity of the Schoology program and to engage in curriculum development and to plan summer professional learning. In phase 3, to ensure understanding, curriculum began to be built in the Schoology OneNote. We established an intentional timeline for the launch of features and functions within Schoology, and we planned for our blended learning pilot. Finally, currently, we are living in phase 4, driving adoption. This includes ongoing professional development, the phased posting of curriculum documents, and implementation planning and monitoring. This graphic shows the timeline for stakeholder access to Schoology. The timeline represents the dates that each stakeholder group launches Schoology use. It is very important to note that this timeline was established to allow for the phased implementation and to ensure that teachers had the place and space to innovate within the platform. The red boxes represent the level of access that each group will have, including the priorities within the learning management system. For example, our instructional staff began work in Schoology in August. They engage in professional learning, they access the curriculum regularly. In some cases, they utilize Schoology for instructional delivery, and they engage in collaboration with their peers. Students received logins to Schoology in September. At our blended learning campuses, they began having instruction within Schoology. During the first year, as you know, Schoology is being implemented along a continuum of practice. This means that there will be a range of engagement with our students in the platform. Our non-instructional staff, other departments within the district, will begin to ramp into Schoology in October. And finally, our parent pilot is planned to launch in February of 2018. We are currently in the testing phase or the testing environment for our parent pilot and our grading tools. This slide details the continuum of implementation for all campuses. In order to determine the level at which a campus would engage with Schoology, we worked tightly with principals. Each Fort Bend ISD principal prioritized the Schoology implementation using this curriculum. We asked them to look at teacher readiness and device availability and consider where they would place their campus. We engaged in this process over 6 months. So for 6 months at principals' meetings, we would come back and talk about, okay, here's what you've decided, here are some questions, please go and engage your staff, so that there was a strong buy-in to the campuses that chose the blended learning pilot. As you can see, the arrows at the bottom of the slide provide a vision for the implementation of the Schoology platform in 2017-18. All Fort Bend ISD teachers, no matter the level of implementation, will access the curriculum via Schoology. All teachers will purposefully integrate technology. Shifting to the right, blended learning cohort schools will design blended learning lessons, and some blended learning schools will pilot the grading tools and parent access. The decision to postpone the pilot of the grading tools and parent access was not taken lightly. We engaged a group of 40 teacher leaders who were learning in Schoology last year and garnered feedback from them around when they thought they would be ready to bring parents into the program. And they asked that we delay that into the second semester so that they would have time to develop robust lessons and communicate with parents. Both the grading pilot and the parent access pilot are in the test environment. We are looking at how Schoology will pass grades to Skyward for ease of access to teachers. All of that is being tested at this time. And now I'll give you an overview of the blended learning pilot. This slide shows a visual of the classroom toolkit provided to teachers within the blended learning pilot. We have 3 levels of device access. To the far left, you see campus-wide access. At our newest elementary schools, campuses were allotted 10 devices per classroom to work with students. The middle column represents campuses who were ready to join the blended learning pilot but lacked devices. On those campuses, our information technology department worked to provide 10 devices per class for the cohort of teachers who would work in the blended learning pilot. And finally, we have one-to-one access at our Verizon Digital Promise middle schools, where each student has access to an iPad each day within instruction. Another key feature of the blended learning device access and infrastructure is that we have added a bring your own device network to support student use of personal devices within instruction. As we pilot blended learning, we have a few objectives. First, we want to evaluate this classroom toolkit to see if it meets the needs of teachers at each grade level and of the content in order to assist students with learning. Second, we want to monitor the level of technology integration and blended learning. How often are teachers engaging students in this type of learning experience? And finally, we want to gauge the mindset shifts related to the use of technology. We would love to shift from technology as an event to technology as a consistent tool for learning. To accomplish these objectives, we are working closely with campus leaders and information technology to provide ongoing training and support. We will use a survey to gather initial data related to mindset, the devices, and the integration of technology and blended learning. This survey will be given 3 times a year to gauge shifts in mindset and practice. The survey, combined with campus instructional walkthroughs, will provide critical information to make decisions on how we scale this program. We know that it is important to develop pathways to scale blended learning. Initial support team walks indicate that bring your own device options are viable at some schools. Most important as we scale, it is that we take into account teacher and leader readiness to impact or to implement this type of instruction. And now I'll talk through some next steps on each of the projects. First, with respect to curriculum development, we will continue the phased posting schedule. Second, we are beginning the revision of the curriculum management plan. The curriculum management plan will outline the system that we've used for curriculum development, implementation, and evaluation. It will provide a guide for future work with curriculum. Related to the Schoology implementation, we will continue the implementation of blended learning, utilizing evaluation metrics to increase support when needed and to make decisions concerning scaling the pilot. Next, we will pilot grading tools and parent access to gather information and plan for a full launch in 18-19 with those tools. A big piece of what we're trying to do in teaching and learning is focusing on continuous improvement. One way that we do that is by providing teachers ongoing job-embedded professional learning in time when they're using the system or the curriculum. Another way is to establish feedback cycles. Fort Bend ISD has had great success with the K-12 Insight in order to gather community feedback. We'll be using that internally to gain input on the curriculum. At the end of each grading period, we will launch a survey with teachers to gather input from them on how well the curriculum supported their implementation, how they met students' needs. We will also launch a platform where teachers can ask questions around the curriculum, Schoology, or other programs within teaching and learning, so that we'll have an internal way to meet their needs very quickly, so they don't have to go through a list of leaders to determine who to call. They can go to this site and put a question in, and they'll be able to get a response very quickly. I can tell you honestly that the launch of the new curriculum and the implementation of Schoology represents a significant undertaking for those who are here from teaching and learning, most importantly for our teachers. I can also tell you that I'm proud to say that in our first campus support team walks, we saw great evidence of teachers interacting with the curriculum and beginning the development, the beginning stages of student ownership of their learning, and also with blended learning. So that's a very exciting time, as Deanna said. At this time, we will open the floor to questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams and Dr. Saavedra. And before I take questions from the board members, I just want to express gratitude on behalf of the board. And as a parent, I know how much work went into this. I know it's been, a couple of years really in the making. So thank you guys so much for your work, for your dedication, for your efforts, for making sure that all the teachers were included and all of the things that really needed to go into this were put into it. I can't say enough, not only as the board president, but as a parent. So I just really want to express that to you guys before we get started. I've already seen evidence of it from my children, and so it's a very exciting day in Fort Bend ISD that we have something like this. So thank you for all your efforts. Do we have questions or comments from the board members? Mrs. James.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Tossan, and thank you, Ms. Williams, for a great presentation, and I'm very excited about this. As you just said, it's been a long time coming, so we're excited. I have a couple questions. One is, well, I'm thumbing papers and trying to not lose my place, so let's go backwards. On slide 15, or on page 15, one of the things you said that I really liked, and I think is sort of has maybe been a guiding principle, but I just want to verify that in the development. One of the statements you said is technology is a tool, not an event. So that's kind of one of the guiding principles around this, right? We're not having Tuesday's the day we play on the iPad kind of activity, right?
Correct. Did you want me to say more on that?
No, I didn't. I just want to, you don't have to, but I guess that's a big shift. So I just recognize that as a big shift in the mindset. So that very simple thing is a big shift. And I recognize that. I think it's great because I know how the young people that are at my house use their devices, and it's not an event. It's a tool. Mm-hmm. The second thing on this slide is we've got bring your own device up here, and I wondered do we have plans about how we're going to evaluate this bring your own device to determine if it's actually being used or if it's worth it, if it's useful, if it's helpful, if it causes more confusion than not? I guess I just think maybe that would be a good idea, because if we're trying to understand what our students are doing and what they're using, we want to be sure if we're relying on bring your own device, then we want to make sure that it's helping us and not making it harder for the teachers. My desire is for us to not make things harder for the staff.
I'll speak to that. JoJo in the Information Technology Services Department developed a guiding tool for parents and teachers as to which devices work the best in our environment. As part of our blended learning survey, we're also gauging the degree to which students are using their own device. Finally, we are tracking, I believe, the amount of data, this is technology speak, so the amount of data that's being used in order to determine if that bandwidth will support.
Okay, that sounds great, because giving some guidelines to the parents on what will work best, that right there is helpful. That will help us, because I think we've looked at this before, and the one-to-one device situation is very difficult to sustain financially, for us to sustain that financially. So help guiding parents and families to what devices are useful, and I think that could be extended to guiding PTOs and PTAs when they're gifting to the schools. Thank you, we like these Kindles, but this won't really help us. What would really help us is whatever it is that, y'all are suggesting to them. So that's my thoughts on that. And then you touched on this in a couple places. I wrote down the question on slide 7, so I'm switching to that one, but I think you also touched on it in a couple other slides. And my question is, do we have a process in place to collect ideas or strategies or additions from teachers as they're going through this and they're thinking, well, wait a minute, this is something I've used before and it's not included here. Do we have a way that we're collecting that in real time? Because teachers might not remember in the spring about the lesson that the unit that they did in October. And how do we capture that stuff in real time so that we can make changes and additions or revisions in real time? Or maybe not in real time, but for next year.
We have a process to gauge what teachers say worked and where they need more support. We don't currently have a process for gathering information from them other than if we observe it, but that's certainly something that we could put in place.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Mr. Rosenthal.
Yes, actually, I'd like to tie into that. So if you look at some of your examples, like on page 10, where, you click on what looks like a link, I guess, and I assume that takes you to some sort of instructions on a lesson, or maybe, right, or maybe even a simulation. And so I know there are often many simulations that can be used for any particular lesson. And so I'm wondering, thank you, I'm wondering, this kind of ties in with what Ms. James just said, I'm wondering if there are, if we are constantly building on these, or if, just like what she just said, if there's a teacher that says, hey, I used this one, it worked really well, can that get implemented and added into the system?
I thought he said slides, I'm sorry.
Slide 10. 10.
Thank you.
There you go. So where it says soil formation simulation, there's probably lots of them, and some teachers may like one, the way it's presented, some teachers may like, so is that, are we going to be adding to these things so there's more than just one choice?
Absolutely.
And it's great that you're doing this so that, like you said, teachers don't have to sit there all weekend long and figure out, oh, okay, I have to go watch this one, and then I have to do this one, and this, that you've kind of at least brought out some good examples that tie to the lesson and tie to the TEAC and whatnot. So I think that's great, but I think we just need to make sure that we're building on those and not limiting teachers, especially when you say it's kind of geared toward, the first-year teacher.
Correct.
So, yeah, there's probably, obviously teachers have lots of things they already know of, but, it would be best to try to, as we're going along, including those in, or just take feedback, be able to take feedback.
Definitely.
And then my other question is, if you go to page 8, this is a TEAC that I'm very familiar with, actually. So I want to make sure I understand. So are there going to be questions that the students answer? Is this kind of like what we talked about last week, where there might be some, written answers to it? I mean, in other words, they're not just filling out this box down here and saying, oh, yeah, I got it.
Absolutely. This could occur at the end of a lesson where students have interacted with, I believe this is on elements and chemical compounds.
Right.
And then students would gauge where they believe they are, and they would determine their next steps. Another way this could be used is after you've produced maybe a reflection on a lab, you and a partner could reflect on where you are, like a peer assessment. So this isn't the learning piece, this is how we're going to get engage students in ownership of their learning and knowing where they are today and where they need to go.
But they're actually going to be asked in some sort of something. It may just be informal, like, do you understand that, the different evidence of a chemical reaction?
Absolutely.
Cowgirls love their new orange phones. Anyway, so, but, I mean, because again, when I look at this little box here, I mean, kids, especially 8.5, eighth graders, they're just, oh yeah, I got it, I got this, I got it. Are they gonna be really kind of held accountable so that they really do have it?
That's actually going to be in context with an activity or a product that they're being asked to produce. So it's not necessarily just a checklist in isolation. It's within the context of a product that they're being asked to produce or an outcome that they're driving towards. So yes, but they would use this to guide for them, how can I determine how successful I've been with producing this product, and use that as a tool to begin to have structured conversations from peer to peer, so that ownership develops and they create feedback, or they have discussions about feedback.
Okay. So it's more of maybe for a couple students to say, yeah, I can try to at least being accountable to themselves at least. Okay, yeah, admit, okay, yeah, I struggled with this, or, hey, can you explain this to me one more time, to get a conversation going, and then, okay. Although I think a lot of them are just gonna, the maturity level at eighth grade, they're gonna, I don't know how successful this will be. It's a great idea.
Right. Well, I
But-
think over time, it'll take them more time to get proficient and deeper into that conversation. Initially, we would expect that some of those conversations will be at the surface level, but as teachers use this over time, it'll deepen the learning for students.
Okay.
But right now, based on the traditional way that we do things, you would expect to see surface conversations before you get to that deep piece.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal and Ms. Helliger.
It's hard to share a microphone with the president. So I have a follow. She doesn't see me. All right. Quick question for you. So I really appreciate the work that you all have done, everyone that has done, and I just wanted to applaud you all as well. The part that I'm really, really excited about is the February 2018. I'm looking forward to that, and I wanted to kind of get a little bit more understanding of that. And that's where the collaboration with our parents and our staff and our teachers when it comes to having the ability to use Schoology. Now, on page, I think 14 and 15 in the document, it talks about parent access to Schoology provides parents the opportunity to view student courses within Schoology. The view allows parents to see the curriculum content and assignments for each course that their student is taking. I want to make sure I understand what the scope of that is and make sure I'm on the same page. So it's just not going in and looking and see that this is the high-level content that the teacher is going over this week. Does it provide support aids to support the students with doing the work so that the parent can help? Because I know that's one of my challenges. When my child comes home with work, I have no clue how to support him because, one, I don't really know the content, which this will definitely, based on the description here, will give me that visibility. But also, how do I support him? What kind of aids? Does it provide that as well?
So that will be contingent upon the classroom teacher. What I can tell you that I'm seeing with my own student who's at a blended learning campus is that when an assignment is given, the teacher has been posting a video so that I could view that to understand content I'm not familiar with, and also for my student to interact with, and parents would have access to both. As we build out the parent pilot, we'll be providing guidance to teachers on what supports they could provide for parents in order to really engage them in the platform.
Okay, because I don't do the new math. And so 2 + 2 used to be 4. It used to be 4. And so I just was saying, I know, especially if we want to really engage our parents and we talk about community collaboration, this is it right here, when you have parents being able to go online, use an app on their iPad or their iPhone, not just the Skyward view that I currently look at to see if my child, where he is with his grades, did he turn in a particular assignment, but then to say, okay, he has an assignment that's due, and this is the content, and this is how I can help him with the content. To me, that's where it becomes extremely useful, because without that, it's just data. In my view, it's just data.
Well, I see one of our teacher development leaders smiling in the back because just today, just today she sent an overview of the planned professional learning to work with parents, and one of the topics is how can I help?
Right.
And so I know that that'll be part of how we support teachers. It'll be a matter of what they choose to post, but it'll definitely be within how we support teachers.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Helliger. Any other questions or comments from the other board members? Mr. Rosenthal?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, in Schoology, I mean, if you're going to have links, right, to some of these lessons or simulations and things, maybe some of them can be, tailored toward, hey, this one's for parents. If you watch this, you'll understand exactly what we're doing, right? I mean, it could just be a video, it could be a simulation, it could just, so.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Rosenthal.
Thank you for the feedback. We appreciate that.
Okay, and then I have one question, back to slide 10. So I saw that we had, or I guess it's slide 10, I saw that we had the accommodations, I guess it was really on slide 6, on the right-hand side for differentiated instruction. So I see the accommodation listed there. I'm one of those parents that knows the difference between an accommodation and a modification. So my question is about that. This is an accommodation that's embedded, but where are the modifications embedded? Do we have, because we've talked a lot about that in the boardroom. I know I specifically have, and other board members have as well. Are we going to have those embedded modifications for teachers, especially those new teachers, or teachers who have not had to make modifications previously for students who are receiving special ed or 504 services, or gifted, who are identified gifted? Where can we find those in Schoology?
Well, for specific students, obviously, we are going to continue with the same process, but to give teachers resources, as I said or as Stephanie indicated, in the Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 sections, as I said, this is one snapshot, but that's where we will embed specific supports. So it might be that in Tier 1, there would be a tag there that would provide specific guidance on how a teacher might be able to modify a resource or modify a portion of their instruction. That section on Tier 1, 2, and 3 instructional resources are places where we can also provide specific tags. And if you think that we feel feedback for more specific in terms of designating between a modification, the difference between a modification and an accommodation, we can certainly work through that process as well.
So I would definitely say that, because there, as we know, there's definitely a difference, because I'm reading this and it says allow students to have small portions to work through, chunk the assignment, set up partners to check over annotations. That's definitely an accommodation, but it does not help a teacher modify the curriculum for a student. And I know it's going to be dependent on a child's IEP and things like that, but there are pretty basic modifications that can happen for children who, because it's usually, if you have a child with an intellectual disability or with a certain diagnosis, you have pretty common modifications, as you guys
Right.
know. And I do think it's important to put those things in there, because the barriers that I've seen with my daughter as we go, and really not even Abby, who's in special ed, but Hannah, who's gifted, is that sometimes the teachers just need a little bit of help in how do I modify this portion of this curriculum for a student? You know, how do I go about making this where that student can participate and have access to the general education curriculum, but do so in a way that modifies it?
Right. And I also, there are other tools in the curriculum, a vertical alignment documents, some of the learning progressions, and when teachers are able to toggle to a different grade level. So if you're studying an IEP as a teacher and there's a child that's functioning below grade level than the current grade level that they're in, then they can have access to the curriculum that supports that grade level, so that, and there will also be
The teeth
information in
alignment.
there to
Yeah.
tier there and tailor the instruction to that child's functioning level.
So I think when we're doing the professional development, we need to make sure that teachers recognize that and know where to go for that, to make sure that we're supporting them appropriately. And I would like to see a modification little icon in there as we're building this out. That's just some feedback as a parent, because I've had to modify for Abby over the years for, you know, it's no disparagement on teachers at all. They just, you know, have a lot on their plate, and there are teachers who are not trained to do it. So we need to provide them that support, because without that that ability to just differentiate quickly, then they get bogged down, as Ms. Rosenthal said, you know, through that planning process. That's how we want to support them.
Or they don't do it as often. So they might have been trained on it, but they're not doing it as often. And so you get a new child to the classroom that you haven't had a special needs child in your classroom in 3 years. You know, you need that refresher. You need some guidance, you know, in order to do those modifications. So I wholeheartedly agree with Ms. Tessin.
Thank you for that feedback. We'll work on what that would look like within each unit.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
We look forward to getting to play with it a little bit, so. Okay, we are now going to convene in closed session under the Texas Open Meetings Act, Chapter 551, and those sections listed in the agenda, and for the purpose of a private consultation with the board's attorney on any or all subjects or matters authorized by law. We are now convened in closed session.